Welcome back, movie lovers. I am Josh.
And I am Chris.
And with our powers combined, we are Garner Brothers Movie Lovers. Today, we're talking the highly anticipated The Batman. This one's got the Riddler. I don't know really what to say as far as you don't really have to describe a Batman movie, so this one's Batman with the Riddler.
And the Penguin and Catwoman.
That's true.
So this one's directed by Matt Reeves, who most recently did the Planet of the Apes trilogy.
Which are much better than they have any business being. They're really good.
Stars Robert Pattinson, of course, as Batman. Also Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. And an unrecognizable Colin Farrell as the Penguin. And John Turturro's in it. He's Carmine Falcone. And Paul Dano plays the Riddler.
Jeffrey Wright.
And Jeffrey Wright plays Jim Gordon.
Yep, and Andy Serkis.
Oh yeah, man, what a cast. Let me talk about the score. So this was actually the element of this film that left the biggest impression on me as we walked out of the theater. Like, I thought the score was really well done. Now, our brother we went and saw it with told me afterward that he thought there was way too much eerie violin. And
there was a lot of that.
There is.
And it's because every dramatic pause was also backed up with bam, 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 bam.
So that's the Batman theme. This is the first time we've had a recognizable Batman theme, though, since a Joel Schumacher film. I mean, Nolan's Batman didn't have a theme. He had minor thirds that went back and forth, and then that was like it, right? These four notes are all over this film, so you may get sick of it, you may disagree with me on this, but to me, it felt like a Jaws theme or something like that, where it's there, it's always there, but it's very recognizable. But Catwoman got her own theme, which I thought was nice, really? but might actually be some of those eerie violins he was talking about.
I think it's when like the Riddler is talking and there's just kind of like a sharp note on a violin, just
yeah. Riddler's theme is really eerie violins, and I think all the the underscore with his character. But Batman has a second theme in this movie that's actually like gorgeous, super romantic theme for the orchestra that I really, really liked. If you listen to the soundtrack album, the last 4 tracks on this very long album, the soundtrack album, by the way, is just like the film in that it's an hour too long and all the hour you could have cut out is brooding. So those last 4 tracks on the soundtrack are great. 3 of them are suites of the Batman and the Catwoman and the Riddler theme. And then the last one is actually a piano sonata that you heard a little bit of in the end credits, which is really impressive.
I liked this movie a lot, I think. I liked it.
Maybe not a lot.
I'm just going to say the one thing that I can't get off my mind. And then maybe other things will come to my mind after I get this out. But it's long. It's a long movie, and it's I think there's times when movies feel like they're trying maybe too hard.
I think that might apply here. Yeah, this movie's trying so hard.
Yeah.
To be a serious, like, good movie.
Yeah. And it is a good movie. It does feel like they're trying a little too hard. Probably the biggest sense of this for me is just dramatic pause. The whole movie is dramatic pauses. Everything is a dramatic pause. And
the speed of Robert Pattinson's footsteps when he's coming out of the shadows. That's the deliberate pace of the whole film.
Nobody does anything quickly this whole movie, except for when Batman's beating up people. Alfred reaches out his hand.
And Robert Pattinson takes kind of an uncomfortable amount of time to decide to take it.
And then, yeah, it's just like that with everything in this movie. It's like they'll be looking at a crime scene and then They'll be like, we're looking for a clue, but we can't find any clues. And the band will be like, there's a clue. And then the camera will like sit there, and then everyone will look at the clue. And then the camera will zoom past everyone else towards the clue. It's long. And sometimes the dramatic pauses are extremely effective and add to the movie. But it's too much.
There was an overused camera device in this movie too, I thought. And it's the super zoom
Cropped in.
Yeah.
I noticed that too.
Everything in the background is out of focus, and the stuff that's right here is super in focus. Man, they used that a lot in this movie. A lot.
They did. I did like that use. This might be something you might disagree with. In the car chase scene.
See, I did not like the way the car chase scene was shot.
So there are times when things are filmed very, very clearly. Specifically, if we're talking about car chases, you look at like James Bond or something. And, we got lots of eagle eye views to make sure you understand what order each of the cars are in. And when one turns, you can see it all happen very clearly. Well, then there's also just poorly filmed car chase scenes where it's just bad. But this didn't feel like a poorly filmed car chase scene. It felt deliberate to me.
Yeah.
And it wanted you to feel the chaos of what being in a chase on a freeway would be like. And I think in the same way that the Bourne movies utilize shaky cam to their advantage, and then the rest of the action world for years
screwed it up.
Yeah, they didn't. In this movie, they did it. They used it really well to create that chaos that you would feel. It wasn't. I was tense during that car chase scene, and there was a lot of chaos going on because they were cropped in. You were seeing a lot of them from inside, or you were seeing like how Penguin was seeing it from inside the car, or how Robert Pattinson was seeing it from his windshield or something, and it was all. I thought it was a really creative and useful way to use that for that chase scene.
It's basically the car chase equivalent of the camera work we just described. The super close in on one thing and everything in the back is out of focus. That's what they were doing with the cars. It would be like looking at the car from the front, or it would be super zoomed in on just the person driving the vehicle, and everything else in the back was out of focus. And so it was so cropped in that I do think it was effective in creating this sense of anxiety during the car chase. I just wished I could have seen it better. I love the car chases where they're, darting between other cars and stuff. This one felt a little more realistic, but it also felt more blunt than that. There's a lot of bluntness in this movie, actually. Very little grace, a whole lot of brutality.
Robert Pattinson is a great Batman, I think. I think I enjoyed him when he was in the suit.
Yeah, another brother of ours was seeing the film and told me afterward that he thought that Robert Pattinson was pretty expressive in the Batman suit. And I wonder if that was a little bit more about that super close crop camera work than anything, but his eyes were pretty expressive. And you could tell, even though he didn't do a whole lot of facial anything, when he was surprised or when he was upset. He seemed to convey a lot of reaction based on how much you could do that in that mask.
He has a lot more
of his lower face.
Like Christian Bale was like, whoop, like little tiny hole there.
I'm going to disagree with you and say I didn't love his portrayal of Batman. Or Bruce Wayne. I just felt like his character was a little one note. He was just...
I think for sure, but
sullen. That was like his whole thing.
I also think that was... part of the entire message of the movie.
I agree.
Okay.
But it was one note. I was glad at the end he learned some things, and so I hope maybe it won't be the same way in the next movie, but...
Sure. Everyone else did great too. Colin Farrell did great, but there's a lot of people involved in that really made that character...
For sure.
Something special. Paul Dano was... I have to kind of preface this. Like Heath Ledger's Joker. Very creepy, but also... You kind of love him still, because it's the Joker. I don't know why. We just love him. And there's none of that with this Riddler. He's way freakier to me than the Joker. And part of the Joker, at least with Heath Ledger's portrayal, was chaos. Like, there was no plan. It was just like, I mean, he had a rough idea of what he wanted to do, but he was just kind of rolling with the punches. This is way more controlled and like intentional, and he was creepier than the Joker to me.
Well, he's a serial killer, and that's one of the one of the major differences between this Batman film and all the other Batman films. This is really the first Batman film where you get to see, they call him the world's greatest detective. This really feels like the first time.
Well, that's what they were advertising the movie as before it ever came out.
Yeah, he actually gets to be the detective in this. And the film feels more like a detective serial killer mystery than it feels like a superhero film. And so, you know, whether you enjoy it or not will depend on that. It is dark, like a serial killer movie is dark. It's a PG-13 serial killer movie, so you don't see some of the grisly horribleness that you might expect in a movie like that, but it has the same feel. And so if that kind of dark and twisted feel is going to throw you off, this film is not for you. And I didn't love it. I didn't love that feel of it. It wasn't as bad as I thought. I mean, I heard so many reviews going into this talking about how sadistic the Riddler is. And he is. But I was prepared for something even worse than we got. So maybe it didn't offend me as much as it might.
I think everyone's comparing it to Seven, and I knew it couldn't be as bad as Seven because this is PG-13 rating. But it's probably about as close as you can get to that feel with a PG-13 rating. And on that note, like, even the Riddler's insignia that he uses, his little signature, it looks like the Zodiac symbol. He leaves ciphers like the Zodiac killer does. He breathes really heavy in his mask like the Zodiac killer does.
Or Bane. He reminded me of Bane a whole bunch when he's talking through his breathy mask like that.
Except his voice didn't sound like a Muppet trapped in a wall.
This movie felt the most like The Dark Knight to me. Of all previous Batman films, this one seemed the most like that. And I think they were trying to give you a villain that was a real standout villain like that. I've heard people compare Paul Dano to Heath Ledger. I don't know that he's as memorable as Heath Ledger. And I will say, like you said, he was scarier for you than Heath Ledger was. Heath Ledger's character bothered me more than this guy did.
Really?
Yeah. There was a feeling leaving The Dark Knight that I had that made me kind of feel fouler than this one did. I bet a lot of people will disagree with that. But I also left The Dark Knight feeling more hopeful than I left this film. I mean, I think they tried to do some things at the end of this film to make it feel more hopeful, but I feel like The Dark Knight did that better. Batman is invincible.
Yeah.
We've seen him take gunshots before, even from 1989, like point blank gunshot to the chest. So like
when Ben Affleck plays him, he gets shot by a pistol in the head, doesn't he?
I don't remember. He gets shot in the head without a mask on in Batman Forever. Two-Face shoots him in the head, right there. The other brother we saw this with was pointing out in a conversation afterward that Christian Bale's Batman felt mortal. Way more than any of the other Batmans did. And this Batman, you still see him, you know...
I disagree.
He takes his shirt off and he's got all these bruises or whatever. You don't think...
I think that's true probably for the first two Christian Bale Batman movies.
Oh, well, when he survives a nuclear explosion...
Ruined by the third one in more than the nuclear explosion.
Okay.
When he's given a knee brace from the doctor... He, like, can't walk, and the doctor's like, sorry, you'll never walk again. You're basically bone on bone there. Sorry. And he's like, okay. And he drops out the window for some reason, goes home, puts a knee brace on, and kicks the bricks out of his walls. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then he gets his back fixed by, like, having somebody kung fu his back when he's hanging on a rope in a prison hole. It's like, it was more ridiculous than that, I think. At the end of this movie, he gets blasted really bad, and he's incapable of doing anything until he gives himself an adrenaline shot. and then he's able to, you know.
That's true. But that felt like the only time in this film when, because he takes some hits, like you mentioned, he gets totally wrecked, like multiple times. And I said at one point, I leaned over to you and I said, every bone in his body should be broken right now.
That's also true in The Dark Knight. Christian Bale falls out of a building with Rachel Dawes, and they
lands on a car
free
and
fall
smashes
onto
it.
a
That's
car.
right.
Fine. When they're done, they're just like, let's not do that again. He's like, what? That was more ridiculous than anything in this movie.
That fall when he flies out of the building.
When he glides?
Yeah.
That is less of an impact than a direct straight down fall from the top of a building.
Maybe.
No, it is.
He gets whipped. That thing.
Yeah, he gets whipped.
So there's like momentum, and he goes slamming into that and slamming down, and then slam.
His impact is braked into like 5 different spots, whereas Christian Bale's is direct hit from a building into a car, death. I think it's just as bad as it has ever been. I don't think it's worse.
Well,
maybe Batman Begins, I would say, has a better case of that.
I like when he's figuring out, we've got to do something about dogs. Stuff like that. I mean, didn't he get shot in the head in this one too?
I don't remember.
It seemed like there was one point where bullets went all the way up.
Oh, yeah.
And then he seemed... I feared a little less for this Batman than I did for Christian Bale's Batman in a lot of the fights. I just thought, well, whatever, because this guy can take, as many machine gun bullets as you can shoot him with repeatedly.
Sure. That was...
Although, getting shot with a lot of machine gun bullets, there is an amazing fight scene in a hallway. Why are hallway fight scenes so good? But this one, the only lighting in this whole scene is from the muzzle flashes from the guns. And it's so a very effective way to shoot an action scene. After that scene was over, we both just looked at each other and were like, whoa.
The strobe effect of the gunfire and Batman just wrecking everybody. It was really cool.
It was awesome.
There was some really awesome creative stuff going on at the end, too, with how he was taking out all the henchmen at the end. That was really cool. But it's impossible not to compare it to The Dark Knight. Or Batman Begins. The action sequences in those 2 movies are phenomenal. The train with the microwave emitter going through the city and Batman chasing it down, and the fear toxin everywhere, and freaking ninjas, and it was incredible. And then they upped the ante in the second one with like this sonar, like bat vision, and there's like SWAT team and hostages, and the hostages are dressed up like clown henchmen, and the henchmen are actually the hostages, and he's got to take out the SWAT without killing them and protecting the people who are the hostages who look like the criminals, and like, oh my gosh. And most of this is just punching, which is what my biggest problem was with the action sequences in The Dark Knight Rises as well. It's just punching. There's nothing fun happening in any of them. Good, fine, bad.
You first.
Good. I think it was good.
Okay. I think it was good minus. Can I give a minus? Like
sure.
A B minus?
It's fine.
It's food.
It's rocking a 80-something on the tomato meter right now.
86.
It has 9 out of 10 on IMDb, which is...
That's usually lower than the tomato meter score, IMDb's rating.
Yeah, so that is a surprisingly high rating. Probably a lot of people will like this movie more than we did. From this point on, spoiler warning, because we're going to talk about stuff.
So come back and finish this video after you've seen it.
Yeah.
Unless you don't care about being spoiled, in which case, sit back and relax.
They had the Joker in this movie for a second.
We suppose. That certainly seemed to be who that character was.
I don't think suppose. I think it's pretty dang clear that was the Joker.
You know what? I hope they don't bring the Joker back again.
They need to be done. They need to...
They got a recognizable actor to play him.
They did.
And so that makes me think they're going to bring him back. But I don't think they should.
They actually set it up so that, like, the end of the movie, the whole city is covered in water. And I leaned over to Chris and was like, Killer Croc would be super scary as a bad guy if in the next movie, if the whole city is covered in water. But I don't know if they're going to do outrageous villains like that.
This movie seems to try to be super grounded.
Yeah.
In reality, the Riddler is a serial killer. Penguin just looks like a fat guy. He doesn't have a big long nose, and he's
When
not
he
oozing
smiles
ink out of his mouth with every time he talks.
Biting people's noses off. That freaking Penguin was so crazy.
What did you think of the Batmobile?
I thought the Batmobile was cool. I liked how Batman was. He was early in his career. He isn't like full Batman yet. Like, there's a moment when he gets to the top of a building, he's about to jump off, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'm about to jump off a building." And then he's like, and he has to like psych himself up, and then there's a bunch of cops behind him who are like trying to get him, and he's like, like jumps off, and like there's also like his motorcycle he rides around is just like
it's just
a motorcycle, and they're like, this is clearly like a Dodge Challenger or something. He's not in his like super nuclear car on a Lazy Susan in the Batcave. Like he's like, he's still working up to that, and I liked that.
Lazy Susan in the Batcave. I didn't like the moment when he had a freak out at the top of that building. I was like, dude, you're Batman. And he's been Batman for 2 years. Like, that's what he said. He's been doing it for 2 years. And I thought, don't whine about it. Just do it, Batman. His car, though, yeah. This Batmobile actually leaves much less of an impression on me than any of the previous ones. And I think it's, again, because they were trying to ground this in reality. And that's what everybody said about Nolan's films. Like, oh, this is more like real life, but...
Until the third one when he was flying around on a wingless pile of crumpled metal.
You hate that movie so much. But the Batmobile, the tank, what is it called?
The Tumbler.
The Tumbler. That thing leaves a huge impression in Batman Begins. Yeah, this one was cool. Like, it's a cool, like, rocket muscle car, but...
It seemed just like something Vin Diesel would drive, not Batman.
Yeah.
The very first time you see him, he beats up these Joker clowns, just absolutely pummels these guys. And then they're like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm vengeance." And then he says that so much that everyone around him just sarcastically uses vengeance. One of the funniest parts of the movie is when this, like, he's at a club with the Penguin, talking with the Penguin, and this girl walks in, and she's kind of like, "What the heck? Freaking Batman's in here." And then he's like, "Relax, babe, it's just vengeance. He won't bite."
I think he may only say that about himself once. Just that first time.
Yeah, but it's clear that he uses that so much
everybody
in the
just
last 2 years.
Because,
then Penguin does it later. He's like firing his gun in the air, and he's like, "Hey, vengeance!" And then Catwoman calls him vengeance at one point, and then at the end, he's trying to make an impact. At the beginning of the movie, he talks about how crime is up since he's been Batman, and he doesn't feel like he's making an impact. But then at the end of the movie, when they're stopping all these Riddler henchmen, they rip off one of the guy's masks, and they're like, "Who the heck are you?" And he's like, "I'm vengeance." And then he learns in that moment that vengeance isn't enough to help Gotham, and that he needs to be more than just an angel of death or whatever Robert Pattinson's Batman was in this movie. And then from that moment on, he's no longer exacting vengeance on criminals. He's saving people. It is kind of shoehorned in a bit late.
Yeah, our brother pointed out that if he had learned that lesson before the last fight and it had somehow informed his actions in the climax of the film, it might have been more impactful. And I think that's true. But I do like that he sees that, the driving force of his character seems to be inspiring the bad guys more than the good people of the city. And he needs to be lifting them up more than just... Because one of his lines at the beginning is that fear is a powerful tool or something like that, right? And so I think at that point he realizes he needs to be some kind of an inspiration and not just an intimidation. And that's a good lesson for him to learn.
And the first inkling of that I thought was like better than the henchman was when he's talking with the Riddler behind the glass. And the Riddler's like, we're the same. And he's like, we're using fear. We're getting all the corrupt guys. And it was like, that's when he should have realized that like his whole vengeance thing wasn't going to work. Anyway, it could have been done a little bit better, I think.
It did pull me along. It wasn't fun like some Batman films have been in the past, but it did kind of pull me along the story to see, okay, where's this going? Just one last thing. As far as how fun the movie is to watch, I didn't see Batman Begins opening night. We actually got to see like a screening prior to opening night. And so there weren't even previews or anything. So it felt kind of special. But at the end of this screening, no applause.
That's true. No one clapped.
None. Now, at the end of Spider-Man, tons of applause.
Oh, yeah.
And
I started
the applause.
The applause. Did you notice that?
Yeah. See, so Spider-Man is a movie where there is a lot of emotional gravitas, but it's still a lot of fun. This movie it tries to be all gravitas and no fun. And so I think that's
DC can't balance that.
But I
They've
think
never been able to.
If I had
the Nolan
seen
movies.
if I had seen Batman Begins or The Dark Knight on opening night, I feel like there would have been applause. And I would have applauded. Maybe I still did.
I still applaud when I watch Batman Begins. When I'm all alone, my whole house is sleeping, and I'm up late at night watching Batman Begins every night like I always do. I always wake everyone up when I stand and clap.
Oh, Dad's just watching Batman again. I appreciated the levity that Nolan interjected. A lot of the interactions between Bruce Wayne and Alfred, those were the moments that gave those movies a sense of levity that I think
it wasn't just comedy. Between those two, there was a lot of hope in those movies between Alfred and Bruce. Yeah. And in this movie, it's like Alfred gets blown up. Like Alfred wakes up and he smiles. He's like, oh, it's Bruce, my illegitimate son. And then Bruce is just like, I hate you. Lied to me.
That's the first thing
dead
he says
to me. I wanted you to die from that explosion. And then at the end of their conversation, he's like, I'm really glad you didn't die from that explosion.
I might even hold your hand if you hold it out for an hour.
Like the video, ding it all. Go see this movie. Tell us what you think about it. I'm sure... Man, just based on what I've been hearing, I'm sure everyone's going to like this probably more than we did. It's, especially if you come to our review and lower your expectations a little bit. You're welcome. Go ahead and follow us and share the video with all of the world. And in case we don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Wow. I've forgotten how to do these videos.
It seems like it's been a little while.
Welcome back, movie lovers. I am starting over. What is on my ceiling? Oh my gosh.